right, we're going to start off the day by talking about the infrastructure bill. We have been talking about this since August, at least, when they snuck in some crypto provisions into the giant spending bill, and the crypto provisions were not taken well by the crypto community. There was a lot of pushback. There were a couple of amendments that people tried to get pushed through at the 11th hour. There was no success. And then on Friday, the infrastructure bill was voted on and passed. So what does this mean for crypto? It's a lot of stuff to dive into. The first thing that I will mention, and I'll throw it to the group, we can dig into some of the others, is that, this isn't the end of it. There are things that the crypto community can do and is planning to do from here. Jerry Brito has written at length about the next steps here. One of them includes a challenge against an existing law that Coin Center argues is unconstitutional, and that is the cash reporting general provision that exists currently. And we can dive into why he says that is unconstitutional. But to start off with, I'm just going to throw it to the group for your takes. I think that, this is terrible news for crypto, in my opinion. It's not great, but it's not the end of the world. And it seems that the markets did not respond too negatively for this. Bitcoin itself went above 65,000 again, kind of inching towards its all-time high. Ethereum passed its previous all-time high, hit a new one. So markets are looking good despite things like this going through. So Will, I'll throw to you first for your thoughts on all of this.
Well, first, a question I have for you. Didn't they take out the $600 reporting piece that was in the previous infrastructure bill, or did they leave that in? I thought I saw. I
have no idea about the $600, but the $10,000 is still in there, and Coin Center is arguing that third-party doctrine needs to include a third party. And so if you're dealing with peer-to-peer transactions where there's literally only two parties, then it's an unconstitutional provision to require reporting of this stuff without a warrant and without probable cause for something. So, but I'll throw it back to you, Will.
Totally, yeah. It's fascinating to see that you can have such terrible language included in a bill, and it remains. It survived the last 4 months of lobbying efforts, and it wasn't taken out, even though almost everyone on both sides of the aisle is pretty much convinced that this language is poor. Even the first writers of the draft of the infrastructure bill tried to get an amendment in that would change that language. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter though, just because how the system is set up, it's very difficult to make changes once things start going through the process. I think it is notable and a good point to be made that this part of the provision doesn't go into effect for quite a while, about a year, maybe even a little bit longer than that.
So 2024 is the date.
2024. What year is it? It's 2021.
2021.
Okay, so we got a while.
They're all just blending together.
It's been a long weekend. You have no idea. So there's still a lot of time for this to be struck down in court, a lot of issues along the way for this bill to kind of happen and start affecting cryptocurrency users. The frustrating part is that the industry has to go through that now. They have to spend resources devoted to that. They're already spending a lot of resources on Capitol Hill tackling issues like this bill specifically. I'm going to throw this up to George, though.
Yeah, well, it's the exact point I was thinking about. 2024 is so far out there, and it's very much old world meets new world, right? Crypto moves fast. We have things get decided on within days or even hours sometimes. And our politicians are out here saying, oh, we'll get this finalized in 2024. Like, how does it take you that long? And I'm not a big fan of politics, but this just seems so identity driven. It's like one side versus the other, but then even when they agree with each other, they can't agree with each other, or that means that you're, not a good Republican or a good Democrat. So it's just a little bit frustrating timing wise. But Jen, you had a point there. I want to throw it to you.
Yeah, just coming off of that old world versus new world point that you made, the provision that Naomi was referring to is from a law that was written 40 years ago that was meant for cash transactions between people over $10,000. And now that's being applied to crypto transactions. And Naomi, I'll kick it back to you to explain more about this. And we've talked about it on the show time and time again. That one provision is really scary because that brings us back to this conversation that we've been having around data governance and privacy and protection. And so if I'm expected to now take in SIN numbers and KYC information, and there's no information out there for me as to how I'm going to store that and what I'm going to do with that. That opens up a whole can of worms that I guess we have 2 years to figure out how this is gonna pan out. But it's just crazy to me that a bill can be passed and now we just say, okay, great, now we're gonna stop, slow down, and define all of these terms when there was ample opportunity to define them to begin with.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when this provision was put forward as applying to cash, there was no real lobby group for cash. There was no like group of hardcore cash enthusiasts who are like, we're going to fight this provision. And when you have the costs that are just diffused across society, there was no real impetus to fight this. Now you have it applying to crypto, and there's a huge impetus to fight this. And so what Jerry Brito says, he says that some aspects of the law, like the 6050 provision of individual reporting requirement, are unconstitutional. If they're not fixed by later legislation, we will mount a court challenge. So what this provision is generally, it's based on this idea of the third-party doctrine, which came out of a case where the government was trying to, get this murderer in jail, and they couldn't figure out how to get him. They knew it was him, and they were like, okay, well, let's, kind of tweak some things about who owns data. And they basically ruled that if you are using a third party like a bank, or if you are using a data center or AT&T, they're a third party, all of your data doesn't belong to you anymore because that company, you've given that company the right to take that data. And so they're applying that to reporting requirements. And they're saying, banks, we will force you to hand over information. If there's anyone who makes a cash transaction over $10,000, we want you to report it to us. And that was all legal, according to them, because of this third-party doctrine. Now, if you're dealing with, then they applied it to cash. Now, cash is like person to person. You don't necessarily need a bank for that. So there's no third party involved with that. In crypto, there's absolutely no third party in a lot of transactions. It's a peer-to-peer technology. It doesn't need a third party. And so it makes a lot of sense to me that they would be mounting pushback against this, going through an appeal and ruling this unconstitutional, because it's just a crazy overreach of government there.